So welcome to today's webinar, Refreshing Acquisitions, New Appearance, New Functionality. Today we're going to look at the changes in acquisitions that we'll see when we upgrade to 3.14. Now, one caveat, we are still about 6 weeks out from the upgrade, so there may be some differences between what we look at today and what we go live with in April. We're going to make sure any significant changes are documented. So today we're going to start by talking about how we got to where we are with acquisitions, and then look at the new features and some bug fixes. We're going to spend most of the time on the bolded points on my slide here, the load MARC order records background imports, purchase orders, and invoices, as those are where the changes are that will affect you the most. We'll then look briefly at the changes to new brief records, MARC Federated Search, load catalog record IDs, claim ready items, and fiscal years and calendars. Now, the Evergreen Community Development Initiative, of which the co-op is a member, contracted the Equinox Open Library Initiative to do a significant amount of angularization of the acquisitions module. And Angular is the new code that Evergreen is written in. There's also been significant contributions to the angularization and further development of this module by staff at Pines in Georgia and King County Library in Washington. So in 2021, with 3.7, we got updated general search and providers admin interfaces. In 2022, in 3.9, we got updated administration interfaces. In 2023, with 3.11, we got updated view place order, load MARC order records, selection lists, purchase orders, and line items, which were probably the biggest changes there. And now with 3.14, we've reached an important milestone in acquisitions. All of the original acquisitions interfaces have now been updated. And this means we have a consistent look through pretty much the entire module. There have also been some significant changes that make the entire staff client more cohesive across all the modules, which you'll see if you're attending next week's webinar or as you look at Evergreen after the upgrade. And you're going to notice this in changes to colors, buttons, grids, and more. There is still some more work to be done, and a final sprint for acquisitions is expected in the next year, next fiscal year 2025-2026, to address the last Angular JS pieces, as well as acquisitions related bugs. And Angular JS is the code we used before Angular, but is still more recent than Dojo, which is what acquisitions was originally written in, if anybody's interested. Now I'm just going to stop my slideshow here. So the changes you're going to look at today are listed on our Evergreen 3.14 preview page, which just went live about 20 minutes ago. And the link to this is available from the upgrade page, from our support page, as well. It will be in the follow-up email that comes later today. So now we're going to switch over to Evergreen and actually take a look at the changes and some new features. And I'm just going to zoom in a bit so that it's nice and big and visible. So we're going to start with load MARC order records. So I'm going to go to acquisitions and load MARC order records. So the big new feature here is that we now have background imports. So this is a new feature that, especially for larger files, allows you to get Evergreen to load the file in the background while you move on to other tasks. And then you should be getting an email from Evergreen when it's ready. So you don't have to sit watching the screen if the files that you load from your vendors generally take a little bit of time to load. So I've got all of my checkboxes and information filled in with my template here. So I'm just going to create my queue and choose my file. And I'm going to choose request background import. And then I can put the email in that I want that notification to come to. And there are two notifications, one that goes out to say that you've requested this background import, and one that goes out when it's completed. So once I have that information added, all I'm going to do is hit upload. And you can see rather than spending time processing, it just says it's completed for background import, and we can go to the background import management. So I'm going to click on that here, and you can see the ones that I've done in testing. Um, and there's no complete time for my most recent, and the state is new. So right now on the training server, we have this running about every 2 minutes. We're still trying to figure out the best amount of time for this process to run. Whether it runs hourly, runs half hourly, runs every 5 minutes. That's something we're still exploring to figure out what's going to make the most sense. So this is going to take us a couple minutes to run here. And while we wait for that to run, if we go to acquisitions, you'll see there is a background imports option on the menu. So if I click on that background imports, it doesn't actually change because it's taken me back exactly to this page. Additionally, if we go to cataloging and MARC batch import export, there's now a tab for background imports. So if I click on that, it again takes us to this page, and you can see that my background import has now completed. We've got our complete time, and we've got a queue that we can take a look at. And I'll just highlight that the reason there's one here in the queue without, or sorry, one here in the list without a queue, is because this file failed to load because my fund codes were wrong. So if you have ones that are blank, that'll indicate that the file couldn't be loaded through acquisitions. So I'm just going to click on the inspect queue here. And you can see that we've got the items in my queue displaying. And I'll have additional information if there were any problems with loading the specific records. Now, of more use to you is probably going to be to go into acquisitions and purchase orders and just do a search either for all purchase orders or for pending purchase orders and find that most recent upload. And I'm limited to 10 here, so let's expand that out. So here we have number 11, PO 18, and that is the one that I've just loaded. And we can see that I've got my 5 line items loaded onto this purchase order. As you start using this in April, please do let us know how you're finding the background imports work for you. Whether you're finding it's a time saver, whether you're finding that you're just doing the load as before, because that'll be useful knowledge for us going forward. One other thing that I'll mention with the load MARC order records, Evergreen, there is a bug fix. So if your vendor has sent your MARC records with a blank value for one of your subfields, that will now be able to be loaded. Previously, the upload would fail, but now if they've missed a value for one of those holding subfields in the 970s, that will load. You'll just need to make sure that you're expanding all and checking to make sure all of the information that you expect has shown up. It will still fail to load though if, for example, your fund codes or your shelving locations in that file don't match what is actually in Evergreen. So here on the purchase order, Most things are going to match what you currently see in 311. One nice little fix is the expand all, collapse all button here. Instead of just being arrows, it now has the words expand all, collapse all, which is nice because it wasn't very intuitive that that is what it was doing unless you actually clicked on the button. Now, if we go into actions and add brief record, we now have a bibliographic template that you can select. So you can actually use the bibliographic templates that are available if you were to just go and create a new MARC record through cataloging. So I'm going to choose the Sitka book RDA one, and I can set that as my default. I'm now going to enter the information for the title. And it really wants to bring those bullet points over. And I'm going to click Add Record and scroll down. And if I click on the title of my line item, I can see the attributes. The MARC view has a bug, which we've reported. But if we go into MARC Edit, we can see, and actually I'll stick with the flat text editor. We can see that not only has it put in the ISBN, the title, and the author information, it's also taken our default book 008 field, as well as the 336, 337, 338 fields, and added those into the record. So that information is already there in your brief record. Especially important is the fact that it now includes the 008, because that was a bug that was causing problems having that field missing in brief records. And you may notice that the flat text editor and the enhanced MARC editor here look a little different. You're getting a sneak peek on this new feature, and we'll be looking at this in much more depth next week. So just to hit return there to go back to my invoice. And I'm just going to add the item information for this line item so that we can actually activate this purchase order. So we're going to choose our shelving location to be juvenile picture books. And our fund code is going to be JFMPL, and we'll give it a circulation modifier of juvenile collection. And I'll just save those changes and click return. So one thing that some of you may have been noticing recently, well, since we upgraded to 311, is that the screen doesn't necessarily fully refresh when you activate a purchase order. So we're going to go through, we're going to activate this order. Because I've got that brief record, it needs to load that into the catalog. So we're just going to submit that. And you can see it now does that full refresh. You can see that it's on order. You can see that the color of your line items have updated. The labels on the line items to show you the status have updated as well. So I know it's a little thing, but it's one that I'm excited about because then you don't have to hit refresh several extra times after you activate your purchase order. One thing I will highlight that is a bug here is we now have two options for create invoice and create invoice with PO prices. They currently both do the exact same action. The acquisitions interest group has talked about this and made some suggestions about how to resolve this. But for the moment, just be aware that if you are creating an invoice from a purchase order, and usually this will just be for those uh, vendors that you work with, like Amazon, Indigo, local bookstores, etc., where you are not loading vendor records. Sorry, yeah, not loading vendor records and getting invoices from EDI, as those ones will come pre-populated through EDI. So just be aware that right now these buttons will do exactly the same thing, and they will pre-populate your invoice with the prices from the purchase order. So if what you put in the purchase order is different than what you're actually charged in the end, you'll just want to make sure that you're updating those before you close your invoice. And now we're going to actually create that invoice. So I'm going to click Create Invoice. And here you can see this looks significantly different from what you currently see with your invoices, but it also looks very similar in comparison to the purchase order. So it's a completely updated interface. Most of the functionality is the same. There's a few changes to be aware of. But first we'll start with filling in this information. So we've got our vendor invoice ID. It's filled in my provider and my shipper. It's got a paper as my receive method. My receiver is NPL. I can choose my payment type. And I have the invoice type, payment auth, and note fields and invoice date that I can update as needed. Now, all of that is the same as currently in invoices. It just looks a little different. Uh, Similarly, the line items look a bit different, but still have all the functionality and fields that you were seeing or that you currently see in 311. One of the significant differences is instead of having that receive items button in the upper right-hand corner, we now have a batch receive tab right in the invoice. So if I click on batch receive here, I can select my line items, or I can expand everything and I can select specific ones. So in this case, I only have one copy on each of these, but if I had multiple copies, I could select exactly which copy I want to receive. So I can either receive the selected items or I can receive the selected line items. And in this case, since I've selected those copies, I'm going to do receive selected items. And you can see the line items all update to indicate that they're now received with their color and their label there. And if we go back to invoice line items, you can see that change there too. Now, another new tab is this print preview. So if we click on, oh, and you can't see it till you save. So we're going to save our purchase order here. Or sorry, invoice. We're going to save the invoice. And now we can click on the print preview page and we can see everything that's when it was received, everything that's been received, and we'll get the amount spent per fund once we close this invoice because the money's not actually spent until that invoice is closed. So I'm coming back to the invoice line items tab here. And we'll take a look. We could add new charges. As you can see, it's very similar to what you see now, but instead of there being one field, you now have a title, description, author, and note field, so you can add additional information about charges that you're adding if that's useful. I'm not actually going to add a charge this time though, so we'll just remove that. And we're going to close this invoice. So we've got our invoice closed, and you can see in the summary here, there's a lot more information about the spending than you currently have in 311. So we can see how much we've spent on this invoice broken down by the different funds that are used. And if we go back to that print preview, you can see that's also included there. And we, of course, have that print button, so you can not only preview your print, but you can actually do your printing. If I go back to invoice line items, we can reopen this invoice as needed, as you currently can. And I'm going to do that now just to also show that we have the same search tab, but it now plugs into the acquisition search that we got a few versions ago. Um, and you can use this if you're building invoices from within. I think this isn't something that's done a lot since a lot of the invoices are coming via EDI. There are a couple bugs that we're aware of right now. Um, as I mentioned, if you are creating the invoice from the purchase order, it's going to come with those amounts filled in based on the purchase order. Previously, that was blank. So you do want to double check those amounts just to make sure that they are the amounts that you want to spend for these. You may have caught it when I did the initial save. When you save, we get a very brief flash of welcome to Webby. We have reported that as a bug. Um, it's not going to affect your use of it. It just might be a tiny bit annoying to have that flash on each save. Um, the other bug that you'll want to make sure anybody using acquisitions and working with invoices is aware of is that if you make a change in the invoice summary to any of these fields that have drop downs, so if I said my payment method wasn't actually direct billing, it was check, the save button doesn't reactivate. So I've made this change, but I can't actually save it. So there is a workaround for this, and that is to literally put any value into the note field. And then you can hit save, and you can also go back and delete that from the note field and hit save again. Um, so that also has been reported as a bug. We're keeping an eye out to see if there's a fix available for that ahead of the upgrade. But that is probably something that you'll see once we upgrade. And as I said, it has a fairly easy workaround. But of course, long term, we would like the save button to reactivate when you make any changes. Um, so that is the new invoices interface. We can also hide this summary up here, and I'll just reclose that invoice. And now that we have paid it, you can see we've got how much has been paid in red there. So very easy to see that on your line items. So I'm going to take us over now to some of the other interfaces that have been updated that libraries, you may not use some of these interfaces. At least one of them wasn't really usable in the old way it was written. So it might be something that is now useful and can be used. But we're just going to touch on them briefly so that you know what there is available and you can use what is useful for your library. So if I go back to acquisitions and do new brief record, you can start from a brief record and either add that to a selection list or create a selection list from it, or you can add it to an existing purchase order. And this works just the same as the brief record form that we saw within the purchase order earlier. It also has that bibliographic template available so that your brief records include those 008s which is really quite important for the catalog to have those. So we're not going to actually create a brief record, but you now can add those directly to purchase orders, which wasn't an option in 311. The one that I think may be of more use to libraries than it previously was is the MARC Federated Search. So I just went acquisitions, MARC Federated Search. So anyone here who does cataloging will notice that this is kind of similar to the current Z3950 import interface in 311. And once you start using 314, you'll find that this is almost identical to the updated Z3950 import interface. This one, though, is specifically for acquisitions. And if we scroll down, you can see in our actions here, we have view mark, show in catalog, and then instead of those import and overlay options that are in the cataloging Z3950, we have add to selection list and add to purchase order. So like with the cataloging Z3950, I can select my sources, I can save my defaults, I can put in my ISBN, and remove that bullet, and then I'm just going to hit submit. And you can see here I have 3 results, 1 in the local catalog, 2 from sources I had searched. And I can now select any of those to view the mark. And I can go and look at the different ones, decide which one is the one that best describes what I'm ordering. And I can select any of them, including the local catalog one. And from the buttons here, or from the actions menu, I can add it to my selection list or purchase order. And if we click add to purchase order here, you can see I can add it to either an existing purchase order or enter a new name for purchase order and it will create a new purchase order. So in this case, I'm going to add it to my existing purchase order. And you can see because I've done that, I can no longer edit the ordering agency or the provider because it already has that specified for the particular purchase order. If I was creating a new one, I could choose those. I have the prepayment required checkbox if you use that, and I also have the option to edit the incoming mark. So if you're using the local catalog, you're not going to want to do this, like if you're using the local catalog result. But if you're bringing in a result from a different source, you can go in, you can make those changes, and then click done. In this case, I'm just going to hit cancel. And if I hit continue, it has updated my purchase order, and I can either go back to my results or I can go to the purchase order. And the purchase order opens in a new tab. So I now have it on this purchase order. And I think the MARC Federated Search, this updated version of it, is something that could be used in conjunction with or in place of the view place order option that's through the catalog. The advantage of the MARC Federated Search is that you can be searching directly by ISBN and there's fewer clicks required to add it to your purchase order or selection list. So if you are creating purchase orders yourself as opposed to the ones where you're loading them from your vendor, I definitely recommend checking out the new MARC Federated Search and seeing if that helps with your workflow. There is one bug that has been reported, and that is that the MARC Federated Search doesn't like it when there is a $sign in the 020 subfield C. And so it refuses to import that. The workaround is if we go back here and go add to purchase order again, we'll just add it to the same, but so edit incoming MARC. If we had an 020 with a subfield C with that dollar sign, you can just edit that field and remove the dollar sign, and then you're able to import it into acquisitions. And that is a bug that has been reported. So I'm just going to hit cancel. Next, we're going to go to acquisitions and load catalog record IDs. I'm not sure that many or anyone currently uses this functionality in 311. What it allows you to do is run reports in the Evergreen Reporter, strip out everything except the record IDs, and then upload a file of those record IDs that you can then add to purchase orders. Add to selection lists, and then from the selection list, add it to a purchase order. This could be useful if you're trying to add addition or buy additional copies of items that have lots of holds, or sorry, titles that have lots of holds on them, and you're going to be ordering those from a vendor that doesn't supply MARC records. So I'm going to give this a new title or a new selection list name. I'm going to choose my files. And we're just going to pull the webinar one there. So I've got this saved as a CSV file. It tells me that I've got 4 records in that file. And I'm just going to hit save line items. And it's now added those 4 line items to a selection list. So like I said, something to think about whether this is functionality that is useful to your library. Some acquisitions functionality isn't going to be used by your library. So if this isn't something that's going to help you, you don't need to explore it any further. Next, we're going to go to acquisitions and claim ready items. So if you do claiming, this interface has been updated. So you can see the line items display the same as the line items across the acquisitions module now. And you have the ability to both claim selected line items or selected items, similar to how we could batch receive line items or specific items in the invoice. So again, if I hit that expand all, you can see I can pick, I'm going to receive this one, or sorry, claim this one and this one. And I'll claim that one and claim selected items. We get a pop-up telling us that we're initiating that claim. I'm going to choose that as my claim action. Select my claim type. Let's say this one received damaged. And claim selected. I can then print the claim slip if I want to. I'm just going to hit cancel in this case. And then it goes through and it lets me claim the rest. And I'm going to abort batch. Actually, I'm going to exit the dialog here because we don't actually want to go through claiming each of these different ones since I selected a few. So those are the new pieces of Evergreen on the non-administrative side. We have one significant change to the administrative side. So if we go to administration and acquisitions administration, you'll notice there's now a fiscal years and calendars option. So if I go into that, you can see we have 3 fiscal calendars set up on our training server here. So we have the default one, January to December, and April to March. And we also have the ability to now specify fiscal years that use one or another of those calendars and when the year begins and ends. Before you get too excited, based on my testing, this does not affect what is shown by default in the funds interface, though this does put the piece in place where that development could happen in the future. So really what this interface is doing is it's just exposing tables that exist in the database so that co-op support staff can make these changes for you, and that it's visible in the staff client. The one piece that I do recommend once we move to 314 is to go to administration and server administration and into your organizational units. Find yourself in the tree, and you can now choose your fiscal calendar here. So I'm going to say that Maple runs on a January to December fiscal calendar and save that. Right now, that's just a label. But if we're needing to look and, figure out what fiscal calendar library is on, that's helpful to us. And as I said, there's potential in the future for development, which will use that fiscal calendar and fiscal year to do other things in the system. And so that takes us to the end of the new features and functionality. I'm going to stop the recording, and then we'll have time for some questions.